Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got a lot to talk about today. Bowl games officially underway, but we're going to take a little bit of a step back, take a look at all of the underclassmen that have officially declared for the draft in this episode. We've got a great debate to get to as well, some mock drafts, but we're going to start at the top of the show with my favorite segment maybe in this show, and that is Scout Stories. Eagles area scout Sean Heinlein is back to talk about Eagles cornerback Darius Slay, what it was like scouting him coming out of Mississippi State a few years ago, what was the book on him, and what are some of the things that we can take away from that projection. We'll touch on that right at the top of the show. After that, we will transition to Saturday Scouting, where Ben Fennell, Dane, Brugler, and I will go through all of those players that have officially declared for the NFL Draft from the underclassmen ranks. Who are the names that you need to know? We will cover all of that in that segment. Afterwards, we will transition to On the Clock, where Chris McPherson returns once again to ruin the holidays for two of us as we have another debate. This week's topic: who helped their stock the most here in 2020? That's going to be a fun debate. Make sure you stick around for that in On the Clock. Then we wrap things up with our draft mailbag. We've got a quick Eagles mock draft from one of our listeners at home. We will break it down right here to finish the show. Before we get to that, though, just a quick reminder to jump onto our Apple Podcast page. Do us the great favor of leaving us a rating, leave us a comment, whether it's a mock draft like the one we're going to hit on in today's show, a question about a specific player or a prospect, or just a comment on how much you enjoyed the show. All those things, a huge boost for us and make the show more likely to be seen by other NFL draft fans. So appreciate everybody who has already taken the time to come through for us over on your Apple Podcast page or on Stitcher, really wherever you listen to your podcast. But all right, that being said, let's get this show going. We're going to jump back to a few years ago. Darius Slay coming out of Mississippi State. It's time for Scout Stories.
Pull up a seat. It's time for Scout Stories.
Well, joining us once again here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, Eagles Southwest area scout Sean Heinlein. Sean, thanks so much for joining us once again, man.
Thanks, Fran. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about Eagles corner Darius Slay. And I remember when he was coming out of Mississippi State, it was him and Jonathan Banks, the two corners, for the Bulldogs that year. And they were both really, really talented. I'm interested to kind of get your memories on scouting Slay, and I guess Banks too, because it almost was like not a package deal, but since they were both so talented, you couldn't talk about one without the other. Memories on kind of evaluating him and projecting him to the league.
Right, that was the thing. When you went in there, Banks was the high-rated guy that everyone's wanting because he had such high production going into that final season. So you're really anticipating going in and seeing this guy. And then you walk out on the practice field and you watch Slay move around, you're like, holy cow, who is this kid? He takes your eye because he was a much better athlete in Scout's eyes. He was just so fluid. I mean, obviously he had great size for a corner, showed ball skills in practice. You're like, holy cow, because he had come from junior college, so he wasn't really on the radar like Banks, who had put together a couple of years in SEC play. So Slay kind of just popped some eyes when he walked out there on the field of, hey, we've got to do some more digging here. There's more than just one guy.
How hard is that to do? I should say how hard is that to do, but do you almost like have to try hard to not get suckered into like, all right, like I know I'm coming in to watch this guy, then not get tunnel vision on just that one player and not miss out on, oh, by the way, there's another blue chip guy right across the field?
Right. Not so much. I mean, you expect to have some surprises at the SEC schools for sure. I mean, there's guys that are backups that end up playing for a long time in the NFL. Ron Brooks, who we drafted in Buffalo and came to Philadelphia. He only started a couple of games at all at LSU,
right.
But was a productive player when he played. And so you kind of expect that there's going to be guys, there's going to be surprises. So you want to keep your eye open for all those guys. Because, again, sometimes they slip through the cracks for a little bit, especially coming from a junior college or something like that. They just haven't found their footing yet in major college football. That's all.
I feel like one big topic that a lot of people will bring up, especially when we talk about Banks versus Slay, was like, and it's not really a black and white discussion, is like traits versus production. In the scouting world, like, how do you guys talk about that? How is that kind of discussed amongst you and your peers?
Again, it comes down to a thing of like potential. Like, where is this guy projected to be in a couple of years? With Banks, because of his traits and his production that he had in the SEC, you kind of already knew what he was going to be going into it. With Darius, it was more of where's he going to be in a couple of years because he's just getting his feet underneath him. coming from junior college, finally getting to start at Mississippi State, putting together the production he did that senior year. It was again the projection of where is he going to be once he works on his technique, once he becomes more refined at the position. How good is this guy going to become? Like, will the production follow the development? Would be the big thing.
I mean, he obviously goes on to become big play Slay that we all know and love.
Absolutely.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining us once again here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, Fran. Do the same.
Hope you guys enjoyed that chat there with Sean Heinlein. Just a couple big takeaways for me. I thought it's kind of interesting getting into the discussion, not getting suckered into just the big name guys, because just to give you a little bit of a look inside what it's like for a scout when they go on these visits to schools, they have a list going in of who are the draft eligible guys, who are the seniors that are graduating. Then you'll also have a little bit on the lower on your sheet of paper, who are the other draft eligible names. But you're going to go in and have your eyes open and just really kind of take everybody in. So when people went in to evaluate Jonathan Banks, he was the stud corner. He was the guy who was in every mock draft, and everybody knew who Jonathan Banks was. But when you come in that summer, as you're getting ready for Darius Slay's final season, you're going to notice, oh, hey, this senior on the other side, I mean, this guy is really, really talented as well. And keep in mind, cornerback, that is a traits position. You are going to see guys every single year that get drafted because they are height, weight, speed athletes. Everybody is always looking for those tools to be able to find guys that can cover some of the freak shows that are at wide receiver in today's NFL. So you're always looking for those talented, toolsy corners, and Darius Slay certainly had that. He'd only been on campus for a full year coming over from junior college, as Sean said, but you're always going to look for those guys with those traits. Now, with that being said, that's why I brought up the comparison between Banks and between Slay, because I remember studying Jonathan Banks. He was longer, he was more experienced, he was maybe a little bit more instinctive, but he was a guy that was a little bit stiff. He played a little bit high in his pedal. There was just a little bit of labor in transition. He didn't have all the tools that Darius Slay had, and that's where you're always going to get into the traits versus production discussion. It's always a fun debate. It's not 100% one way or the other. Because every player is an individual. But I will tell you, the way most teams operate, when the scouts have to turn in those final reports, a big thing that they will say is, what can this guy be for our team tomorrow? And then what can he be 2 years or 3 years from now? You're always going to factor in what this guy can be, not what he has already done. So you're always trying to project towards the future. And because if it was just as easy as, who are the guys that have been most productive? Anybody can do that. We can just read through the box scores and see the guys that are doing the best, and that's the easy way to project the NFL. That is not the case. You are trying to project what guys can be moving forward, and I think the example of Darius Slay and Jonathan Banks, a good example of that. So good stuff there from Sean Heinlein. Once again, hope you guys have enjoyed this segment each and every week here on the show. That being said, let's keep this one going. Let's get Dane Brugler, Ben Fennell. It's time now for Saturday Scouting.
It's time for Saturday Scouting.
All right, let's get things going here with Saturday Scouting as I welcome in both Dane Brugler and Ben Fennell. Guys, today we're going to do a little bit different version of Saturday Scouting, where instead of we're going to focus in on what happened this past weekend and big takeaways from scouting many of these bowl games. We're going to kind of look big picture, take a step back and look at all of these underclassmen that have, while it's not official, have come out on social media or through their respective school and said, yes, I will be declaring for the 2021 NFL draft. Now, this was a list that was created by 24/7 Sports over the weekend. So I know there were some names that came out midday on Monday. They are not included in this discussion. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to focus on just the guys from the underclassmen ranks because, as we've talked about numerous times here this year, the NCAA did give every athlete basically a free year of eligibility. So if these guys want to choose to go back to play again in 2021, even if they are redshirt seniors, they can do so. Now, it gets a little cloudy because the schools are still being held to a scholarship limit. So it gets a little bit cloudy in terms of how many of these guys are going to be able to actually go back to their own school and play another year of football. But that remains to be the case. We'll see. There's a bunch of guys that have already done it. Miami's De'Ara King, Pitt's Kenny Pickett. A bunch of other guys have already said, yes, I'm going back to play an extra year in college. But for this discussion, we are just going to focus on the guys who would, in a normal year, be underclassmen. So that being said, that out on the table. Hope you guys, number one, had a good holiday, had a good holiday weekend here. We've got New Year's later this week. First things first, the guys who opted out did not play a down this year. So these are guys that we've talked about all through the summer. We talked about them when they made their decisions. We'll just buzz through the names really quickly, and then I've got some follow-ups here for you guys. Number 1, at running back, Memphis's Kenny Gainwell. LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase, probable top 10 pick here in the 2021 NFL draft. Sage Surratt from Wake Forest, big possession receiver. Oregon's left tackle Penny Sewell, another likely top 5 pick. Northwestern left tackle Rashawn Slater. Dane, I know you are a big fan of Slater's. Stanford's Walker Little. We talked about him last week with Jeff Schwartz. Going over to the defensive side, a bunch of guys. Greg Rousseau, Joe Tryon, the pass rushers from Miami and Washington, respectively. Defensive tackles Jay Tufele from USC, Jalen Twyman from Pitt, Tyler Shelvin from LSU. Then you've got Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons, another likely top 10 pick. Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech, another likely top 10 pick. A bunch of those guys here in this group. And then Paulson Adebo from Stanford, Javon Holland from Oregon, and LSU safety Kari Vincent. So that being said, bunch of names there, guys that were juniors or redshirt sophomores that opted out, did not play. Dane, who could have helped themselves the most this year? If you look at that group, who's a guy you're like, man, I really wish we could have seen him. We're not killing the decision to opt out because obviously with COVID-19, a lot that comes into play for these guys. But who's a guy that could have helped themselves this year? Who do you wish you got to see a little bit more film on?
Yeah, and of all those names, I thought 3 really stood out to me as guys that could have made some money by coming back for this season. Stanford's Walker Little, Miami's Gregory Rousseau, and then LSU's Tyler Shelvin. Walker Little, he had a good, not great, but a good sophomore year in 2018, and then he had the season-ending knee injury in the 2019 season opener, and then he opted out of this season. So he's played in 1 game since December 2018. How is he doing post-surgery? Has his technique improved? There are just so many unanswered questions that teams are going to have to try and figure out this draft process. I never understood the first-round hype with Walker Little. But now, he has work to do if he's going to be a day 2 player, just in terms of teams understanding where he is in his development. Rousseau, with all those traits that are certainly appealing, but he's not yet to some of his parts. There's a lot of unproven to his game. And with this draft class, missing that clear top rusher in the top 10, Rousseau, he's still a good player. He's still probably going to be a first-round pick, but he had a chance to be the guy in this draft among the pass rushers. And who knows? He still might be. Teams might fall in love with the traits. He could be a top 10 pick, but it could have been, with a strong season this year, could have been already tied up by now. Then the last one I wanted to talk about was Shelvin, who moves so well for a 340, 350-pounder. I actually had a scout tell me that he thought Vince Wilfork, he had that type of potential last spring, but questions about weight, questions about, is he ever going to reach his potential? Is he going to be the best player he can be? There's a lot of questions like that are really going to maybe downgrade him throughout the process.
Dana, a quick follow-up there on Walker Little. I don't know if you've got any insight into whether or not he has received a Senior Bowl invite. My understanding is that he got his degree. Do you think he's going to take that up?
He has the invite, and he has not accepted. It doesn't sound like he's going to, which I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't take advantage of that. He does have his degree. He does have the Senior Bowl invite. Does not sound like he's going to accept.
Interesting. All right. Well, Ben, who's a guy from that list of the underclassmen that have opted out that we did not see here this fall in 2020? The next chance we might get to see most of them is going to be the Combine in February. Who are you most excited to see on the turf at Lucas Oil Stadium?
Well, the first name I had written down was Walker Little, and I think he'd be doing himself a huge disservice to not go down and compete in Mobile, because I'm just excited to see him in Indianapolis because it's going to be the most competitive thing we've seen him do in 2 years. Dane had mentioned only that one start against Northwestern. 2018, he didn't play in the bowl game either. So it was early December. So it was quite a while since he's been a consistent performer for that team. But if we're talking February at the Combine, it's all the guys I'm excited to do the underwear Olympics. So, I want to see if Micah Parsons is going to run low 4.4s at 245 pounds, and Kari Vincent has world class kind of track speed, and Caleb Farley at 6'1", 205 pounds. He's another guy with track background, is second in the state in 100 meters. Reportedly can run in the low 4.3s. threes. He's a guy that I think can really leapfrog Patrick Surtain on a lot of boards around the NFL with a low 4.3 time and maybe some explosive jumps. He's going to move really well out there. So all those kind of, I think, freak listers that we always get the information in the summer. I'm interested to see how many of those are official and check out once we see them in February.
All right, so those are all the guys that opted out, that did not play this year. Now we're going to go for the players that did play, even just a little bit this year, and we'll go position by position, a couple follow-ups here for each of those spots. Obviously, all eyes on the quarterback position. As of this point, the only guy who is officially going to enter the 2021 NFL Draft, North Dakota State quarterback Trey Lance. Only played one game this year, that kind of showcase game against Central Arkansas. Ben, give us the quick refresher on Trey Lance and how you view him, how you think he's going to project to the next level.
Well, just a redshirt sophomore. While he only played one game in 2020, he's only a one-year starter for North Dakota State, but they went 16-0, won the national championship, very run-heavy offense, also the number one scoring defense. So very cushy quarterback situation, very competitive team on both sides of the ball. This is a thick-body quarterback that's tough, athletic, fearless, definitely plays more of a leadership style role, being a young player in that team. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. Heavy run offense. So a lot of their things are off of play action. We'll move the launch point quite a bit. I know me and you, Fran, watched a bunch of his tape, and we came impressed with his ball handling as a young player and all those different under center run action elements and all that kind of misdirection in the backfield. A lot of under center elements. The cons, though, kind of an average arm, bit of a long windup. I think he really struggled with some pure progression reads in the straight drop back game, which they didn't ask him to do a whole lot. So we didn't see a whole lot of volume with that style of passing. I want to see him protect himself more, too. He was young, a bit fearless. I thought he took on contact way too much. His availability will be the best ability in the NFL. He needs to be a little bit smarter with his body, a la Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray. And then just the whole level of competition, the FCS, only one game this year, only a one-year starter. Is it a large enough body of work to get a true assessment on the kid?
Yeah, this is a guy that I studied in the summer rather, and two names, just kind of thinking like, how could he be used at the next level? You look at what Buffalo has done, especially this year with Josh Allen. I could see him being used in a very similar kind of fashion. And then even like a Ryan Tannehill, if he were to go to that kind of offense, that's what could feature him playing early on in his career. I do think he's going to need a little bit of patience, a little bit of development. Very little experience, as Ben mentioned, but a really intriguing talent for sure. Dane, obviously there are a few names here that we have not talked about. Trevor Lawrence has kind of insinuated that he's going to declare. We don't know for sure. You look at Justin Fields, don't know for sure if he's going to declare from Ohio State. And then Zach Wilson from BYU, also not confirmed yet. When do you expect the three to make a decision? And do you expect that all three of these guys will for certain be in this draft?
I do. I would be very surprised if any of the three decide to go back to school. Trevor Lawrence, like you said, he's basically said he's going. The plan is to go pro. He's already graduated. Zach Wilson's family, they've been vetting agents. So I do think at some point here in the next week or so, we'll hear from the BYU quarterback, Justin Fields. Now, he's the interesting one because I think he could benefit the most out of these quarterbacks by returning to Columbus for one more season. But I'd just be very surprised if it happened. It seems like a lot of these guys, they have it set in their minds that the plan is 3 and out. And, even if things don't go exactly according to plan, they're just so set on making that jump that they do it. And I get it. You could come back and get hurt or even damage your draft stock even more. There's definitely downside to coming back. So I understand why some of these players make these decisions. And Justin Fields, there's a good chance he's still a top 10 pick. So it's not like he drastically needs to show scouts these some improvements in some areas, even though I wish he would. So strong bet. All three of these quarterbacks are going to join Lance in this class.
All right, let's get to the running back position. Oklahoma State's Chuba Hubbard, North Carolina's Javonte Williams, two very, very talented players. But let's not lead off the list. Kansas Jayhawk running back Puka Williams, Louisville's Javian Hawkins, Oregon State running back Jamar Jefferson, and Marshall running back Brendan Knox. Dane, I want to come to you first. Chuba Hubbard, Javonte Williams, we've talked about them plenty here this fall. Which of the others intrigues you the most of Puka Williams, Javian Hawkins, Jamar Jefferson, and Brendan Knox?
I think Javian Hawkins, because he gets yards in chunks. He doesn't have any power to him. That's not his game. but he plays with quickness. He's got lateral agility to him. The long speed. He can create those big chunk plays. And so, he kind of reminds me of a more dynamic version of like a Donnell Pumphrey. The size is an issue. It's just there's no changing that. He's a small guy at the running back position, but as a complementary back in a backfield, I think he could be a lot of fun. So Javian Hawkins is the one of those group. I would also say Brendan Knox too, out of Marshall. I think he has a chance to be an early day 3 player. But I think all of these players are really intriguing in their own way.
Ben, who do you like from that group?
Yeah, definitely Javian Hawkins, interesting player at 182 pounds. In a full workload in 2019, he had 19 runs of 20 plus in college football. I believe that was third most in the country. So certainly a guy with the home run speed, and get him in the open field, and you get to see that explosive element in the offense. Puka Williams, interesting. Another undersized back at probably 175 pounds, soaking wet. It's a guy that's caught 66 balls in his career out of the backfield. Really good hands, bit of a change of pace guy. I want to see if he can be a Tariq Cohen or maybe a JJ Taylor coming out of Arizona last year and be one of those day 3 guys that can really get onto the field on third down and see what he can do out in space in the screen game and just maybe being a perimeter back. But I know Puka Williams was a high recruit out there at Kansas. That team hasn't always been super competitive, but he has a lot of ability, and that wasn't always easy to evaluate in that offense and behind that offensive line.
How about like a Tony Pollard type player here, Ben? I mean, certainly a guy that can be used in a lot of different ways. They use him out of the backfield a ton on vertical routes. They did in 2019. Really fun tape.
It's a unique package. He might be 175 with, a helmet on. So he's definitely a little light in the pants, but you see the foot speed.
Handful of receivers here I want to get to. Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. He initially opted out, but then opted back in. Louisville's Tutu Atwell, explosive kid from South Florida, there for the Cardinals. Ole Miss wide receiver Elijah Moore, built very similarly. Then you go to LSU wide receiver Terrace Marshall. North Carolina's De'Ami Brown. Texas wide receiver Brennan Eagles. We have not talked about him too much here on the show. And then East Carolina wide receiver Jake Prohl. Dane, the shine has kind of worn off a little bit on Rashad Bateman. Do you still expect him to go in the first round? He was in every first-round mock draft back in the summer. Do you still envision that here for Bateman as we sit here at the end of December?
It's certainly possible. He's a polarizing prospect. There's no question about it, because he's a certain type of receiver that just isn't a fit for every offense based on what they're looking for. He's not naturally explosive. His speed falls below NFL standards. And honestly, I was very underwhelmed by him in contested situations. And I think that's the main difference between him and a Michael Thomas or a Keenan Allen. Yes, he has the route savvy where he can leverage coverage and create windows. That's going to be the key to his success at the next level. But I see more of a low-end starter more so than a high-end starter, which is fine. He can make an NFL offense better, but I don't know that you necessarily draft those guys in the first round. So personally, I would be surprised if he goes in the top 30 picks, but a team could certainly fall in love with him.
Interesting. Ben, which of these other receivers give you personally the most juice? You got to pick one. Which of that group really gets you the most excited for their projection on the next level?
There's some guys that are going to be fast, like the Elijah Moores and Tutu Atwells. I want to see Brennan Eagles run. At 6'4", nearly 230 pounds, he's going to be this year's Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, and he'll be competing with Nico Collins to be that big, oversized receiver, really, threatening the 4.3s. I think he's going to be a low 4.4 type of receiver, a guy that's been able to win vertically at Texas down the field, even with that size. So I think he's going to be one of these kind of Indianapolis darlings with a height, weight, speed.
What do you think of the rest of his game, Ben, with Eagles? I mean, did you see a guy that can get open, that was running sound routes? What do you think of the rest of his game?
No, I think it relies a little bit on those physical abilities, just kind of beasting smaller corners at the catch point. He has a really good roll off the line of scrimmage. I think gets him to that top speed and can put some cornerbacks on their heels, especially in that Big Ten off coverage. I think he eats up that cushion. I don't love his change of direction. I don't like him getting in and out of breaks. He might be a guy they envision moving to tight end at the next level and maybe being one of those vertical stretch seam guys. So I think his future and positional fit is a little still to be undecided, but he's definitely an interesting athlete. I'm not sure if you saw similar things.
Tutu Atwell is the guy for me that I'm so excited to see this. First of all, he's been on the freak list, but I think we know about the time speed, what it can be. That shows up on the football field, whether they're working him horizontally on jet sweeps and bubble screens or working down the field. This guy is a really dynamic playmaker. So I'm excited to see what he can do here this offseason preparing for the draft. Let's go to the tight end position. Florida's tight end, Kyle Pitts. We're going to talk about him a little bit later as well. Not a surprise that he has entered this draft. Penn State's tight end, Pat Fryermuth, Boston College tight end, Hunter Long, and then TCU tight end, Pro Wells. Ben, I'm going to come to you first here. We know about Kyle Pitts. We've talked about him a ton here on the show. One of the best playmakers in this draft, regardless of position. But take a look at Fryermuth and Long, because I feel like they're kind of in a bucket amongst some other guys, maybe in that second tier or third tier of tight end. How do you compare those two players and how they project to the league?
Yeah, I think Fryermuth is the best in-line true wide tight end in the class, but I'm not willing to give him a first-round grade yet. I didn't love his play in 2020. I was hoping he was going to ascend and maybe get a little bit stronger at the point of attack. Still a little bit underpowered. Reminds me of an Owen Daniels style player that I think can survive as an in-line wide, won't be overpowering, will be able to stretch a little bit in the pass game, has pretty good hands on the underneath stuff, but won't wow you in any area. So I think some people thought we were getting the next Gronk as well. We're so quick to anoint those next inline tight ends. But Gronk, I think it's a little bit more of a Zach Miller, Owen Daniels. And then over to Hunter Long is a guy with a really interesting skill set, another dual threat, two-way tight end, maybe not the sexiest in either area, like I was just saying, but a guy that can maybe squeeze in late day two with his ability to block a lot of the way, an Anthony Fasano played in the league, or maybe even a Nick Vannett coming out of Ohio State. Wasn't really used in the pass game, but carved out a nice, 5-6 year career being a good, strong player that can catch the ball, in the middle of the field and in traffic there. So I think those two picks, while Anthony Fasano, Nick Vannett, not the biggest, sexiest names, really good pros that you can survive in both the run and pass game.
I think Long is a guy that has that two-way skill set that teams are coveting for sure moving into the NFL. Dane, of those two guys, Fryermuth and Long, who do you think gets drafted higher?
I'd lean Fryermuth, and I don't think he has any overwhelming traits that are really going to blow you away. And yes, the baby Gronk nickname just needs to be retired. But he's athletic, he's competitive, he's dependable. I think he could be a high floor type of starter in the NFL. You just know what you're getting. And I could say a lot of these same things about Long, but Fryermuth, I think, gives you a little more polish as a guy that could plug in and play right away. So I think he's going to be kind of in that Cole Kmet territory as, somewhere between 35 and 50. That type of draft pick.
Hey, Dane, where'd you have Fryermuth based on last year to this year? What were you looking for him to kind of improve on? I know he's been teetering first round, second round. A lot of people wanted him, in that back end of round one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought he could have been in that late first round where, a guy that sneaks in there and, you just, because he does everything pretty well, it's just, you really didn't see him ascend to do anything necessarily great. As a blocker, doesn't get you too excited. As a receiver, he does some good things, especially in the red zone. He has Penn State's all-time record for touchdown catches by a tight end, breaking Gesicki's record. So there's you draft him in the first round. I just don't think he's done that. And you factor in his injury that ended his 2020 season. Just we have to check up on that, see what's going on with that injury. But I think he's just a solid prospect, and that's the type of guy you look for in day two, not day one.
All right, let's take a look at the offensive line to round out the offense here. Virginia Tech's left tackle, Christian Darrisaw. We've talked about him a good amount. You guys both very much squarely in that Darrisaw bandwagon. Texas left tackle, Samuel Cosme. Michigan offensive tackle, Jalen Mayfield. Missouri offensive tackle, Larry Borum. Florida A&M's Calvin Ashley. Now, Florida A&M, you typically don't see many juniors declaring. He is a former five-star recruit transferred from Auburn. Then on the interior, we've got Ohio State's Josh Myers and Texas Tech's Jack Anderson. Dane, went through a handful of offensive tackles there. Looks to me like potentially three of those guys could end up in the first round. Do you agree?
Darrisaw, definitely. His combination of brute power, just natural balance are outstanding. I think there are times where you wish he would consistently play through the whistle. There's a little too much spectating on his tape, which is bothersome, but he's a first round pick. Cosme and Mayfield, both could land in round one, but I just don't feel as confident about them as I do Darrisaw. Cosme, He's quick. He works hard to stay square, stay underneath rushers. So he can anchor versus power. He's got some. What's your comparison for him, Fran?
For me, it was Taylor Decker.
Taylor Decker, yes, I like that a lot. But I think his margin for error is smaller than some of these other players, and that's where you get a little worrisome with him. Mayfield, he doesn't have great length, and I think that's scouts have written him up as a guard because he's under 33-inch arms and he plays powerful. But is he coordinated enough to stay on the outside against NFL-style rushers? There's definitely a split on him in scouting circles. So, especially this year, he originally opted out, but then he opted back in. I think only played in 2 games this year because of injuries. So, a lot of questions about Mayfield that might squeeze him out of the first round.
Ben, outside of those 3 guys, Darius Slay, Cosmi, and Mayfield, of the other 4, who is the one guy that piques your interest the most?
Probably Larry Borum in his size. I want to see, how he looks kind of moving in space out there. It seems like the NFL is pretty set on kicking him inside. And then Calvin Ashley is a really interesting player for Florida A&M offensive tackle, former 5-star at Auburn. But don't forget, guys, he took a pit stop to FAU in between those schools. And early on campus, he was going to compete for the right tackle spot, had a nasty injury in one of the first practices, serious head neck injury as well. So his college career has not gone as planned, but a lot of ability. He's a massive player, and we'll see if the NFL can tap that potential.
Josh Myers on the inside, I think, is a future starter at center, potentially even at guard. I'm a really big fan of Ohio State's Josh Myers. Let's go to the defensive side. Pass rusher. 3 interesting names here at the top of this group, guys. Penn State's Jason Oweh, just dripping with potential. Texas's Joseph Osai made the move to defensive end this year and really kind of boomed here with the position switch after being an off-ball linebacker. And then Miami's Jalen Phillips rounding out that group. And then you got 2 guys that are underclassmen that are also going to the Senior Bowl. Kansas State's Wyatt Hubert and UAB's Jordan Smith. Dane, of those 3 first guys, what's interesting is all 3 have pretty big question marks. Jason Oweh, look, he's got great tools, but only a 1-year starter was a very startling lack of production this year for him. Joseph Osai, only 1 year playing on the defensive end, so you've got projection there. And then Jalen Phillips, he had to retire. He was the former number 1 recruit in high school, but had to retire at UCLA. There's questions about all the stuff going on in the background there. Of those 3, how do you kind of see them being drafted? In what order do you see them kind of coming off the board as we sit here at the end of 2020?
Yeah, that's such a tough question because at this point in the process, it's might come down to preference and which teams are more risk adverse to different categories. I can already envision the debates that I'm going to find myself in this draft process with Oweh because he had exactly 0 sacks in 7 games this year, which is going to stick out like a sore thumb for a lot of people. And listen, I care about sacks just like everybody else when you're looking at the pass rush position. But I care more about the tape. And the tape shows a player who routinely found his way to the backfield. So the 0 sacks doesn't bother me as much. I think he's a first-round talent, but that's going to be something that's going to be talked about a lot over the process. Jalen Phillips, same type of thing. He's a first-round talent. And he's not on the Bosa's level, but if you squint really hard, you can see a little bit of the comparison with the way he uses his hands. So he wins with quickness. But again, like you set it up, Fran, injury history, huge question mark. Teams are going to feel differently about it in terms of where they'll feel comfortable drafting a player like that. And then Osai, who he wins more with motor than explosion, which isn't a bad thing, but is that consistently going to work at the NFL level? So, I mean, basically, I'm saying I don't know how to answer your question. There's going to be no consensus on these guys from team to team. Some will be okay with Jalen Phillips' durability questions. Other teams are going to say, I don't care about the stats for Oweh. He's a freaky talent. Bring him on down. And then some are going to say Oweh because the motor, you just can't teach that competitiveness. So I think those 3 names are really interesting. And from team to team, it could be very different.
I'm still squinting, trying to see the Jalen Phillips and as a Bosa, but
squint hard, really hard.
Yeah, I'll keep trying. Ben, you've talked a lot about UAB's Jordan Smith here on the podcast. What excites you most about him? Give us a little bit of a refresher there.
Well, he's a tall, twitchy glass of water. He's nearly 6'7", 255 pounds. Very technical pass rusher and a good run defender. 2nd in the country in QB pressures. but he came off a season last year. He was the highest graded run defender by all defensive linemen by PFF. So he's a guy that was very competitive in both phases of the game. He's a Florida transfer, so he was a high recruit, had some off the field issues, but just want to see him kind of move around in some of those movement drills, see how his zone drops look, see if he's scheme specific, if maybe he can hold down outside linebacker role on occasion. If you squint really closely on a couple of those games, he looks like a Marcus Davenport, maybe not as filled out, but twitchy, explosive, can win inside, outside, hustles from the backside. I don't think he's going to be an elite tester, but he's going to stand out and be right there with Gregory Rousseau as the tall, long, lanky limb guys that can win in a multitude of ways.
Some people that are listening to this show are driving. We're asking them to squint time and time again. I mean, we're going to result here in some kind of accident. Ben, let's go to the defensive tackle spot. Only one guy on this list, NC State's defensive tackle, Alim McNeill. We talked about him back in the summer in our primer for the ACC, but give us an update here. What can fans expect from an Alim McNeill making the jump to the NFL?
Well, what you can expect from this NC State program is well-built players ready for the NFL. Their strength coach, D'Antonio Burnett, one of the best in the country, always gets them ready. Showed up on the freak list over the summer for an under 5-second 40 at over 320 pounds. This is a guy that played running back and linebacker in high school, and it seemed like it was at that size. It was this massive freak show in the backfield and at Mike linebacker just crashing into the line of scrimmage. So what am I saying? 6'2", 320-pound nose tackle with a whole lot of athleticism and light feet. He's a fun player to watch, bit of a dancing panda. I don't want to say he's Dontari Poe. It seems to be like the low-hanging fruit of the last 10 years as far as comps, but that really is the style of player.
Do you think he's a top 5 defensive tackle that you've seen in this class? Top 10, top 15? If you had to loosely stack where he is in this defense among these other defensive tackles, where do you think he is for you?
He's way down there. I'm not sure if he's even squeezed into the top 10. I think he's a bit of a ball of clay right now. I think he's still learning the timing, playing from that defensive line position. I told you his pedigree, linebacker, running back. So just block identification, things like that off the ball, still a little bit to be desired. But a defensive line coach is just going to salivate and gush at his tools and traits, especially coming from Indianapolis, where we know these 300-pounders turn all sorts of eyes and heads when they run and test really well.
Yeah, certainly a name we got some buzz on back in the offseason. Glad that we'll get to see what he can turn into rather quickly here in the NFL. Let's go to the linebacker spot, guys. Handful of guys here as well, namely the two at the top. Nick Bolton from Missouri, Tulsa linebacker Zaven Collins. I think all three of us here really like both players. We all three, I think, feel like both could be first-round picks. So excited for both of those guys. Then you round it out with Texas A&M's Anthony Hines, South Carolina's Ernest Jones. Dane, I want to bring it back to those first two guys, though, with Nick Bolton and Zaven Collins. Loaded question. Who gets drafted first between those two and why?
I think it'll be Zaven Collins. I think he gives teams more versatility, especially for the 3-4 teams that want to use his size and his ability to win in different ways. I don't think it's any coincidence that he's always around the football. He's creating these impact plays week in, week out for Tulsa. He can drop in coverage. He can blitz. He can mirror versus the run. And listen, I'm a big Bolton guy. I mean, I think he's just a magnet to the football. He plays with power behind his pads. He's just a fun guy to watch hunt the football. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be shocked at all if there's not the consensus, or not even most teams, but a few teams have Zaven Collins as even the top linebacker ahead of Parsons.
It might. That would not shock me at all. And looking even at Nick Bolton, Devin Bush at this point in the process was not being viewed as a top 20, top 25 pick. I think Bolton is arrow pointing up on that guy, in my opinion. Ben, Anthony Hines, Ernest Johnson, anything on either of those guys?
Yeah, a little bit. Ernest Jones, I believe.
Ernest Jones, yep.
South Carolina, really good size, length at 6'3", nearly 230 pounds. Ever since he got that Most Improved Player award in the spring of 2019, an absolute tackling machine. Led the team in tackling 2019, came right back, led the team in tackling in 2020. He's obviously going to be able to get on the field through special teams. I think that's one of those high floor players with really good energy, athleticism. He looks the part. Now, Anthony Hines is interesting because he was wanted by everybody in the country coming out of high school, 5-star, number 1 inside linebacker, U.S. Army All-American, parade All-American, but showed up and I think just tried to rely on a lot of his God-given abilities. And that happens a lot of times when you're the for lack of better words, when you're the man coming out of high school, you think you're getting the finished product to go plug and play. And the early in his college career, it didn't go great. He actually didn't play in 2020. So while Texas A&M is kind of in prominence this year and working their way into the top 10 and a pretty good season by Kellen Mond and some of those defenders, Anthony Hines hasn't been a part of that. So really interested to see what the NFL thinks of a guy like this that hasn't played since 2019. And he was only a sophomore back then after having a season-ending injury in 2018. So 6'3", 226. And all I'm really talking right now is I have no idea what to make of his play.
Let's go to the cornerback spot, guys, because to me, that's a position we always see a bunch of players declare for the draft from the underclassmen ranks. So many teams are drafting corners. It's one of the highest drafted positions in football. So let's get to a couple here. We've got South Carolina pair. We've got J.C. Horn, son of Joe Horn, likely first-round pick. Israel Mukwamu on the other side. He is a tall glass of water, 6'3", 200-pound corner. Then you've got Florida State corner, Asante Samuel Jr., a name that Eagles fans will recognize. Georgia's Eric Stokes, a lot of people very high on. And then you get to a bunch of other guys. You got Michigan State's Shakur Brown, Kentucky corner Kelvin Joseph. He's a redshirt sophomore. Northwestern's Greg Newsome. Dane, I know you wrote about him recently. Syracuse, they've got a pair in Ifeatu Melifonwu. Syracuse's Trill Williams as well. And then Wisconsin, Rashad Wildgoose. Dane, big list right there, a bunch of corners. How many do you view as potential top 50 picks when you look at just at that group of underclassmen corners? Obviously, we have yet to hear from guys like Patrick Surtain Jr. as well.
I think I'd probably put the over-under at 3.
Okay.
J.C. Horn and Asante Samuel. I think those guys are top 50 players. And then you have several maybe guys. Eric Stokes falls in that category. Melifonwu was really interesting. Greg Newsome's really an intriguing guy for me. I included him in my top 10 draft eligible cornerback rankings a few weeks ago. Reminds me a lot of Kendall Fuller as a prospect, just a really coordinated athlete, smart. He's got ball skills. Right now, I think he's probably more in that early to mid third round range, but with strong workouts, I think he could make a play for the top 50.
Ben, one name from the rest of that group. Who interests you the most, if you can give us one guy?
Well, we're going to go with the best name in the group. You said Trill Williams, but his real name's Trillion, which is a great name. Showed up on the freak list over the summer. 40 inches, 4'3", 440 at 6'2", 205. This is really more of a safety product, though, in my opinion. It's kind of went back and forth with the safety in the corner position. Has played some nickel, so a lot of time over the middle of the field. I want to see how he tests. And if he kind of turns heads out there, and I think him and Melifonwu are really going to be the darlings of the defensive back group at their height, length, speed, athleticism, both really fluid players. They're long. They're going to test extremely well. And now we just need to see if the tape matches because we've seen a couple of Melifonwus roll through there before and look like the darlings of Indy and haven't produced on the other side. So it pained me not to pick Wild Goose as the one name, but we'll stick with the Syracuse guys.
Well, you mentioned – go ahead, Dane.
Sorry, Fran. I did want to shout out Shakur Brown, too. I think he might be the most competitive corner in this draft class. He was a really fun guy to watch. He's not a great prospect because he's a little stiff. He can get crossed up versus savvy route runners. But he's got above average ball skills, the physical nature that he plays with, the competitiveness. He's a lot of fun. The interception he had against Rutgers was big time. So he's a guy that I don't know that'll go on day 2, but somewhere early on day 3, I think Brown's going to hear his name called.
And Fran, Dane, Michigan State's one of those programs that maybe doesn't always rack up the wins, but typically produces some really good professionals and guys that are ready to play right away, even on the back end. And I think of guys, I'm blanking right now, the safety that's carved out a nice role in Indianapolis.
Kyrie Wilson.
Yeah, Kyrie Wilson. It seems like there's guys like that on every level that come out of Michigan State, whether it's Raekwon Williams playing for us for the Eagles right now. A lot of guys that are ready to go.
All right, let's get to the safety spot. Ben, you talked about the 2 Syracuse corners, Trill Williams potentially making the move to safety. Well, the Orange, they've got another guy in Andre Cisco, who is a safety and has been extremely productive throughout the course of his career. Hurt his knee midseason and opted out shortly afterwards. So we've got Andre Cisco, Texas safety Caden Stearns, Pitt safety Paris Ford, and then a couple guys that are a little bit under the radar. Arizona State's Ashari Crosswell and Mississippi State's Marcus Murphy. Ben, we talked about Cisco there. Overall feelings on him as we sit here today, because I feel like people are either hot or cold on his prospects moving forward.
Well, rightfully so, because his tape is very hot and cold. He'll wow you with some big plays and then kind of leave your head scratching with some boneheaded plays and some busting coverage. And that's kind of the nature of the NFL. You want those big impact plays on the back end. But I'll tell you what, Fran, you watch those movement drills on the back end, he's going to look great because there's no reads. Keep your eyes on that coach, moving the ball left and right. You're going to watch him flip his hips. He's going to catch every ball in the air. I want to see him on the bench press. Over the summer, he put up 17 reps at 225 at about 200 pounds, which is a great pound for pound value there. So we'll see if he could squeeze in maybe the back end of the first round or early day two. With this safety position, I think kind of up in the air at the moment.
Guys, every year we kind of take note of programs that are quietly putting out quality NFL players year after year after year. I feel like Arizona State is one of those teams where I've been intrigued by a number of prospects over the last couple of years, and credit Herm Edwards, Marvin Lewis, that whole staff. So I want to ask you, Dane, I have not done a Shari Crosswell yet. Give us the scoop here on Crosswell and what you think he brings to the NFL.
Well, I had a scout put Crosswell on my radar over the summer, and I was really intrigued with his tape from last year, so much so that he was one of my top 5 safeties coming into the year, and I wrote about him over the summer. But then he lost his starting job, earlier this season. He was suspended for a fight during practice, and he basically said, all right, peace, I'm out. So off the field, there's plenty that we need to figure out with Crosswell. On the field, he has range. He has toughness. Arizona State would use him in a lot of different ways as a nickel, as a safety. So there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that scouts need to figure out to best understand the type of professional that he is. But there was buzz about this player before the season as maybe a day 2 prospect. And so plenty that we need to figure out with him.
And with seniors, Chase Lucas and Jack Jones, there might be 3 Arizona State defensive backs drafted when it's all said and done.
Yep, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought those names up. And those are some names that potentially we'll see potentially end up in Mobile. But there are 6 of these guys that we've already mentioned, Ben. Hunter Long from Boston College, the tight end. Texas Tech's Jack Anderson, the guard. Ohio State center Josh Myers. UAB's Jordan Smith. Wyatt Hubert from Kansas State, another pass rusher. And then at Fatu Melifonwu, the Syracuse corner. All 6 of those guys are going to Mobile. Of that group, who in your mind has the chance to best help themselves and maybe raise their stock a bit here down at the Senior Bowl?
Well, I'm going to go with one of the local guys, and that's UAB's edge Jordan Smith for a number of reasons. First of all, kind of local down there in Alabama, but coming over from the University of Florida and the way he left that program, he's going to have some questions to answer. He could kind of be the darling host of the week and, be on his best behavior, maybe, fall in love with some of the coaches and the position coaches that week that can really vet him personally. I think it's a big opportunity for him, obviously on the field, but to answer a lot of those questions off the field, which, it's we can't ignore that. He was a very serious kind of accusation and violation at Florida that got him dismissed from the program. He's a talented player. Now let's see what type of person we're getting. So I think it's a big week for him to kind of check those off the field boxes.
All right, so we're talking about some of these big names. There are a bunch of guys we have not yet talked about. We alluded to the quarterbacks, whether it's Jalen Waddle at Alabama or, Dylan Moses at Alabama, Patrick Surtain Jr., Sean Wade at Ohio State, DK Kendrick from Clemson. There's a bunch of guys that we could bring up here. USC left tackle Elijah Vera Tucker. Dane, we're going to dip into you as our insider. Is there anyone we should expect to hear from here, in the coming days and the next week or so?
I think we'll start to see an exodus from the losing teams after January 1st.
Got it.
But among the players not in the playoffs, scouts are expecting Vera Tucker to declare. That seems like a near done deal. Davion Nixon, a defensive tackle from Iowa, he's expected to go. And TCU's Trevon Moehrig is expected to make the jump here pretty quickly. So a few of those names are expected to be pretty, maybe even by the time you're listening to this podcast. Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. Now, he's a really interesting one. Only a redshirt sophomore. Could use another year, just like, a lot of these guys could. But it'd be tough to pass up a spot in the top 40 picks. That's where he's currently projected. So Ojulari is one of the underclassmen that I don't know that we have a firm grasp on whether he will or he won't, but we're excited to find out because he could be another exciting pass rusher in this class that desperately needs him.
Do you think we're in for any surprises that a guy maybe is set to be a top 50 pick and may end up going back for whatever reasons?
That's a good question. I don't, if there was one, maybe like a Jalen Waddle, because he's coming off the injury. He saw Devontae Smith coming back for his senior year, and what that meant. We didn't mention Mac Jones, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's a name that would it really be a shock if Mac Jones said, "Yeah, let's do it again"? I mean, I think that's certainly a possibility. So. A couple of those Alabama guys, that's a program that will bring back Nick Saban. He can be pretty persuasive and, let's come back. We'll get you even better and get you more prepared for the NFL. So a few of those Alabama players could make that move.
Those are the two I was thinking about. I want to know what type of grade is Dylan Moses and Christian Barmore getting from the advisory committee, and how much do they think they can maybe improve that? Or, I mean, if Barmore is getting a second round grade, is he happy with that? Is Nick Saban happy with that? Is his family happy with that? I think a couple of those Alabama guys were the ones I was thinking about.
And Dabo's always been good at keeping the Clemson kids there too. I mean, you
absolutely.
Look at DK Kendrick would be a name I'd keep an eye on. I wonder if he'll be able to keep him there on campus.
One other one would be, even though I don't think he's going to, but Sean Wade. It just has not had the season that you were hoping for if you're Sean Wade, moving out to outside corner. And it's been such a weird year. I mean, he could really help himself by going back and either moving to safety full time, or if he thinks outside corner is really his future, just getting better with a full off season and, a more of a regular year, hopefully, in the 2021 season.
Well, guys, let's wrap this segment up the way we always do, and that's with our film room recap. So one guy that we've studied over film in the last week, Ben, I want to come to you first. Who's a guy that you've studied over the last week that's kind of caught your eye? And we can open it up to seniors as well here for this discussion. I know we've talked all underclassmen so far.
I was finishing up Paulson Adebo at Stanford, who's a really interesting player. He's a big, long corner at 6'1", 185. He's really physical and savvy at the catch point. He plays with that kind of my ball mentality, and you see it in all the ball production anytime he's on the field, whether it's PBUs or picks or, whatever he can do to get the ball back. Definitely the size length combo, plays physical, is strong down the field defender. He's good in the red zone in those confined spaces. I'm just worried about his agility and his overall athleticism. He can really play in those wide open spaces. His start-stop is a little clunky. Occasionally, he likes to just ankle dive, heavy feet on those change of directions. But he's a guy that just handles himself and handles contact really well. So I would love to see him match up against bigger receivers and even tight ends. But that last game in 2019, UCF receiver Gabriel Davis freaking torched him. So, that's always left a bad impression. It wasn't his last game. I think it was earlier in the season.
Yeah, it was early. It was 6 September, yeah.
That definitely opened my eyes to him. And Gabriel Davis has turned into a nice pro with the Buffalo Bills. So I want to see how Paulson Adebo, how the NFL kind of views him and where he's going to fall into the pecking order of a really interesting corner class.
Do you think that he could be a starter, or how do you kind of view his projection?
I worry about his ability to come in and start right away, but I think he's a tough player. I'm going to hopefully hit some contributions out of special teams. He might be a guy you want to move over into safety or be more of that nickel guy to match up against some bigger slots and tight ends, and maybe not leave him on those islands outside the numbers with, big gazelle receivers that, might be able to out twitch him, for lack of better words. But he's a tough player. He's a smart player. He's an instinctual player. He's been on the field a ton out there in the Pac-12. He's a guy I would be excited if he's available on day 3. And I know people are saying, you're talking about a day 3 corner. But that's what we do here on the Journey to the Draft. There's a lot more than just round 1. And I think guys like Paulson Adebo's are going to fill out NFL rosters. And now it's just figuring out what type of draft capital should we spend on him.
He's a guy that I agree with the athletic questions. Watching the film, talking with guys that have been through there and have played there, they'll talk the way he tests. So I kind of wonder if he might be one of those shockers when we get down to Indianapolis, which we'll see. That'll be something.
Was that testing good or testing bad?
Testing good.
Good. I've heard the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep an eye on there. Dane, who's the guy that you've studied?
So De'Ami Brown from North Carolina. This kid's got some buzz. There's some Stephon Diggs to his game. When I was watching his tape, I got that, the size speed element is very similar. He's not as reliable as Diggs was or is, but with Brown, his game is based on speed, a lot of slants, a lot of inside out routes, taking advantage of that one cut acceleration. He's got quick feet, very fluid adjustment skills. So throws behind him or above his eye level, he can come down with. He's not going to power through contact, but he still has some dynamic yak ability. I think some are going to question whether or not he has the play strength to make a living outside. But there's a lot. I mean, I watched 4 of his games, out of his game tapes, and I'm looking down at my notes, and I have a lot more pros than I do cons. He's one of the better double move receivers in this draft class. So, and I think he's consistently improved his feel as a route runner. It's still not maybe the strength of his game, but he's gotten better and better. And just a really skilled player, using that speed, using those double moves, and he'll do it in different ways. A head jab, a quick settling of his feet. So De'Ami Brown's really, really intriguing to me.
So you talked about how he checked a lot of boxes. When I sat down to watch Ifeatu Melifonwu, the Syracuse corner, we talked about him a little bit earlier, I checked a lot of boxes for me. I mean, he's 6'3", 213, unique size, and he is a good athlete, not just for that size, but he gets in and out well. He's not an explosive long strider, but I think he's got solid speed, and I think he can carry vertically. I'm going to be honest, and maybe it's just because I watched it. Ben, you and I talked about it afterwards. Watching Obi Melifonwu early in his career, you saw the traits, and it was like, all right, you could see this guy, move around. You see how big he is, how long he is, but he was always just a step slow to react. You saw lots of false stepping. He was a little bit hesitant. This guy never false steps. He's got great reaction quickness to the top of routes, man coverage, zone coverage. If he's hip pocketing from press, or if he's playing from depth and off, he's reading everything really well. He's got the ability to finish in the air. He's a really physical take-on player in the run game. He's a good tackler, good production as a 2-year starter. I mean, he had 22 ball disruptions and 18 starts. There weren't a lot of things where I was like, I'm really worried about what this guy's gonna be able to do at the next level. I really liked Ifeatu Melifonwu. And if it were, you guys know, I love asking our guests, who's the guy that you're higher on than most, or why is this guy not getting more buzz? For me, that's Melifonwu. I'm wondering why I kind of think by the time we get to late January into February, we'll be talking about Melifonwu certainly in a higher stage than what we're talking about right now.
It's interesting. I've only done 1.5 of his tapes, but you see the traits. There's no question. He's tall, he's long, and he moves well. I thought something that really bothered me, and that what I saw is he made way too much contact before the ball arrived. But again, I have not seen the sample size to come up with a complete report just yet. But he's certainly intriguing. There's no doubt.
And just to make the clear differentiation of the two brothers, Obi, much more of a back-end safety player, in my opinion, was a see ball, get ball type of safety that really relied on just his natural range and athleticism. His brother, Effie, is playing corner and is a true corner, is playing some press man. I showed you, Fran, a bunch of clips where he's playing press man with no help over the top, which definitely speaks to the trust they have in his coverage ability, can click and close and off coverage. I put on the Wake Forest tape last year where he was targeted 15 times and battled Sage Surratt, and you could really see the length and a variety of different coverage techniques. So really interesting player, but just to make sure we let the fans know that the brothers are playing different positions.
All right, well, we talked about a bunch of players there in that segment, guys. As I always say, let's talk about 3 more. It's time now to go on the clock.
On the clock.
All right, well, it's time to welcome in Chris McPherson here to be the judge and jury for our next segment here on the clock, where we have been keeping track all season long. I have the lead right now in our total tally. I've got 6 points. Dane's got 5 wins. Ben's got 4. This is a big one here, guys. Which prospect has helped himself most in 2020? I'm going to be honest. I'm running out of categories here and debates. So if anybody out there has some and you want to send us your way, be sure to reach out to us and let us know. I don't know how many more of these I've got in the bucket, guys. So I don't want to just claim victory. So if you got ideas, throw them my way. Today's debate, though, who has helped themselves most in 2020? Dane is going to kick things off. Ben has got second pick. I will be the caboose. I will have the third pick. Dane, I'll let you kick things off. Go for it. Make your argument.
This is a loss.
So I was very happy to have the first pick here because no prospect has helped himself more this season than BYU Zach Wilson. And it's kind of funny that last year we said that, we're never going to see a Joe Burrow ascent ever again. Here we are a year later, and it's pretty close. And I'm not comparing Burrow and Wilson as players. They have very different styles, and their journeys have been very different. But both were considered 5th-round picks going into their final year, and that's assuming this is Zach Wilson's final year. He has not yet officially declared, but we expect that to happen. Burrow ascended to the first pick based on the feedback that I'm getting on Wilson. He is the favorite to be the number 2 quarterback off the board this year, likely in the top 5 picks. I got a lot of quote unquote, no way that happens types of messages when I put Wilson at number 2 in my mock draft in November. It's becoming more and more accepted that it's just a realistic possibility it's going to happen. Part of that's Justin Fields hasn't been as great, but Wilson, based on his play, has put himself in that top 5 conversation. And look, he hasn't come out of nowhere. He put himself on the map as a freshman. But then last year, the biggest issue for him were the injuries. Teams were really taking kind of a wait and see approach with him. The nagging injuries were an issue last year. He came back healthy this season. He's been outstanding, albeit versus unimpressive competition, but the talent has been obvious. The velocity, the understanding of ball placement, the mobility where he can create off platform. Some team in the top 5, top 7 picks are going to get a very exciting quarterback. And, I have yet to talk to anybody who had him better than a mid day 3 grade on him entering the year. So it's a monumental jump for Zach Wilson.
First question for you, Dane. Why did you put him all the way up at number 2 back in November?
It just felt like it was trending that way with the way he was playing, with the talent that he showed. And it's tough because you can't do anything about the competition that he's playing this year. It's not like Joe Burrow and he's playing an SEC schedule. But when you break down his talent and the fact that he still has to make the reads, he still has to make the throws, and he's doing it, and he's making these plays and doing a really good job at it. I mean, part of it is Justin Fields has not been great this year. Part of it is Trey Lance. You've only seen him once. Zach Wilson has been that next quarterback. And when I talk to teams around the league, a lot of teams are saying Wilson's the guy, and they would not hesitate to draft him, top 5, top 7 picks.
So you said that he showed talent, promise as a freshman. Was the big question coming into this year the injury? Was it just a matter of could he stay healthy and put together a full season?
Right, because last year he had games against like Washington, USC, like a better sample size against better competition. And he was a little up and down, but a big part of that was the nagging injuries. And, it's really weird dynamic with BYU because they had just a murderer's row of competition on their schedule originally, but then COVID happens and they lose everybody and they had to patch together a schedule, and none of them are Power 5 teams. And so nothing you can do about that, but teams are still very impressed with the natural talent that he shows. And so I don't think that the lack of having competition on his resume tape is going to stop him from being a very, very high draft pick.
See, Mac, all you had to do is put on the tape last year. You saw the wow. You saw the potential and the ability. I saw him in person at Tennessee, then the next week against USC, back-to-back overtime wins. We can't lead every scout to water here. Sometimes it's just a little flash and you got to let that grow into what he can be. And I thought he showed you a lot in 2019. It wasn't as easy to see as it is in 2020, which is obviously a pretty easy assessment and why he's in the top 5 now. But, the ones that really dug into his play and saw between all the smoke screens of BYU's 2019, which didn't always go great, but you saw the excellence just kind of squeak through and you had to catch it at the right time.
Well, Ben, if you were in last year's draft, where do you think you would have been drafted?
Well, who's to say with Herbert and Tua and Joe Burrow? I don't like to live in the past, Dean. So, we can never know. He probably would have been in the mix there, but
I will say that, Ben came on after seeing him twice in 2 weeks, and both weeks was like, hey, we got to keep an eye on the Mormon Manziel. So, that was last fall here on the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Yeah, it's not like he's just come out of nowhere. He was, I remember as a freshman, people were talking about him. But I have yet to talk to anybody around the league or elsewhere who really thought, he's definitely going to be a top 4 round guy in this class. I think what he's done this year has really put him on a rocket ship.
But C-Mac, Steve Young and McMahon and Ty Detmer and John Beck and Max Hall, it's just a factory out there. You can trust BYU Cougars putting pro quarterbacks into the league. It just is it's what they do. It's what they do.
I was going to say John back on that list too, I believe. So
digging hard in my pocket for that one.
No, in the last 20 years.
Good stuff. I will say, to help Dane's case, you think about those, as soon as the one draft ends, you got the instant mock draft, and everyone had Trevor Lawrence going number 1, Justin Fields probably number 2, Trey Lance in the mix. I don't have it in front of me. If someone can dig one up and disprove that Zach Wilson was not in the conversation, I'm all for it. But Ben, you're on the clock now.
Well, we're going to change positions here. We're going to go over to Alabama receiver Devontae Smith, who's had one of the most prolific seasons in college football history at the receiver position. Just like Dane said, never thought we'd have another season like Joe Burrow at the quarterback position. We didn't think we'd have another season like Jamar Chase until the very next calendar year. And it seems like we've all forgotten about Jamar Chase's prolific season. But you have to reflect on where we've been with Devontae Smith. And in last year's draft class, with the who's who of CeeDee Lambs and, Jerry Jeudy's and Ruggs and, even the day 2 guys like Shenault and Jalen Reagor going in the first round, I don't know where Devontae Smith's going in that group. I don't know if he's a draftable guy last year, getting caught in the mix with all those receivers. So you turn the page to 2020. No Jerry Jeudy, no Henry Ruggs, no Tua Tagovailoa, top 10 quarterback. Yeah, Mac Jones, and you got to split reps with Jalen Waddle. Suddenly, he's the guy, and we lose Waddle. He's even more the guy. I'm doing this all with Mac Jones. He's been on a meteoric rise in 2020 from a potentially unknown receiver into a top 5 lock in this year's draft class. So, just watching him grow and this journey from, just unknown, buried on the depth chart of Alabama into the player he is today has been very exciting. And sure, did he leave Alabama in receiving last year? Yeah, he might have. But C-Mac, don't look at the box score. Don't, box score scout. I know you're better than that. Trust me when I say it. He has improved and helped himself the most in 2020.
Dane, you're smirking.
People can't see this because a lot of people are, they're listening. Ben couldn't get through that with a straight face. I mean, he's grinning.
Just casting and reeling over here. Casting and reeling.
I mean, the big thing that when I think about Devontae Smith and how he's helped himself is that when Jamar Chase opted out in August, the three of us sat here and we were like, yeah, I mean, he's the number 1 receiver. There's nothing else he can do. No one's going to overtake him. And now I would say the majority of mock drafts have Devontae Smith ahead of Jamar Chase. And so that, to me, is proof that Devontae Smith has really, really helped himself with what he's done this year.
Ben, you owe Fran for making a better argument than you did.
Did it that fast, too. That was impressive.
Dane, where is Devontae Smith in your mock draft?
He's number 2 behind Jamar Chase, but he is significantly higher than what we thought over the summer. I mean, in the summer, it was, okay, maybe he's top 25, but now he's top 10, and I had him slotted to the Eagles at number 6.
But the real question is, Dane, where does he go in the 2020 class? Because I think he's probably somewhere between Van Jefferson and Denzel Mims in that late round 2, if looking back. And he was a guy that barely scratched your top 60 before the 2019 season. I think he was 52 out of 60 then. So a guy that was just barely cracking that second round love from you.
Yeah, but by the time the draft came around, he would have been in the first round. He was considered a first rounder if he came out last year.
Ben, you said he was undraftable.
He did say that.
Depends who you ask.
You said he was undraftable. Come on.
Yeah, he smoked Derek Stingley, but we had to, mess with the pre-snap manipulation and the timing and stuff. He didn't do it in a normal fashion.
Trying to sound like he never played college football. And all of a sudden, 2020, of all the oddities, we get Devontae Smith.
Alabama lucked into that talent. They just fell right into it.
Oh boy, Fran, save me.
All right, well let's stay in the SEC here, guys, and I'm going to go over to Florida tight end Kyle Pitts. Keep in mind, shortened SEC year, right? So 11 games for the Florida Gators. He was injured for a couple of them. All right, so he actually only played in 8 games. C-Mac, in 8 games, Kyle Pitts, a tight end, 43 catches, 770 yards, 12 touchdowns. Those numbers would be eye-popping for a normal college football schedule if he played 12, 13, 14 games. He played 8 and put those numbers up in an SEC-only schedule. So he is the shoo-in this year for the Mackey Award, top tight end in college football. But C-Mac, he is the first tight end in college football history to be named a finalist for the Fred Biletnikoff Award as the top receiver in college football. What he has done this year is remarkable from a tight end perspective. So we've seen the story of quarterback. Dane mentioned at quarterback, like Joe Burrow, came out of nowhere last year, rags to riches story, rah, rah, rah. We saw that the year before. Kyler Murray was a backup and went from 0 to 100 and became the first overall pick. Baker Mayfield was a 2-time walk-on and went from 7th round pick to first overall pick. Carson Wentz was an FCS kid that no one knew was a 2nd overall pick. Like, we've seen this story before at the quarterback position time and time and time again. We don't see this at tight end. We don't see a guy vault himself into the top 10 of NFL draft just since 2000. So 2 decades sample size. 6 guys have gone in the top 15. So you would say, all right, you feel pretty good he's going to go top 15. Dude, Kyle Pitts might go top 5. He might go top 6, top 7. He's going to be the chic pick to the Cincinnati Bengals to pair with Joe Burrow now that they're picking at 5th overall. Only 3 guys have cracked in the single digits. Kellen Winslow in 2004, Vernon Davis in 2006, and then TJ Hockenson did it a couple years ago in 2019. You're talking about uncharted waters for a tight end, putting up crazy production in a limited season, and then also dueling out for the top receiver in college football, along with Devontae Smith. To me, I look at what Kyle Pitts has done and say this guy has helped himself more than anybody, especially when you keep into context the position that he plays and how he's being viewed, up here versus all other tight ends in NFL draft history.
So where'd you have him before the season?
I did him in the season, to me, or in the offseason.
I haven't studied him.
Yeah, no, I studied him.
He was off my board.
Dude, I studied him, and I thought, okay, like maybe we're looking at a potential Evan Ingram at some point. Like, all right, like maybe he's late first round, maybe. But that was not taken into account this production. I didn't anticipate him to have the season that he did. And now, like I said, he's going to be a lock top 10. I didn't view it as a lock top 10. I'm not going to sit here and say he was undraftable like others, but I'll say that I felt that he was a potential. Maybe he's a first round guy. But now, I mean, he's a lock for the top 10.
Wow, Can I tweet that? A lock for the top 10?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair right now.
Dane, I think you mocked him 18th in like your mock draft right after the 2020 draft or somewhere in the summer. You had a mid 1. So pushing him up in the top 10 isn't the craziest of rises.
No, Dane's always ahead of the board on everybody. So that doesn't shock me.
In my preseason top 50, he was number 11 for me. So, I mean, it's not a shock to see him possibly go in the top 10. The talent's worth it. I mean, the coaches call him a unicorn because this guy is rare. In my mock draft that I did over the weekend, just a quick top 10, I had him going 5 to the Bengals. So there's no question he is a supreme talent who helped himself with what he did this year. But again, I think he moved up 5-6 spots, for just in my opinion. I don't think he made a monumental leap up the boards like we've seen from Zach Wilson.
Well, before we send this to the jury, the one-man jury of CMAC, who else is in this conversation of meteoric rises? Mac Jones, obviously, seems to be the next name.
I would say Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. I would probably
Zaven Collins. I'm surprised neither of you guys went with Zaven Collins.
Yep.
The linebacker out of Tulsa.
I mean, Davion Nixon's getting first-round love, and I'm sure he wasn't even a name in some prospect sheets.
Yep.
Yeah, that's another good one. Azeez Ojulari is another one.
That's a good one. That might be it. There weren't many names that I'd say like that could really make the argument for.
This is a tough one. This is a very tough one. It's a fun one. I thought, didn't a week ago, didn't Kyle Trask have no help there in Florida? Or that's that wide receiver.
Yeah, that was the cop out for Ben. Was that he was no wide receiver? Yeah.
Even though Dane rattled off, Kadarius Toney and everyone else who's going to end up being drafted, but nonetheless,
I hit mute when he starts talking. I don't know what's coming out of their mouths. Sorry, I can't keep up.
Oh, you know what? It's been funny because, like Kyle Pitts, I didn't know it before the season, and so Fran's argument off the bat was like real strong. So I'm like, this guy comes out of nowhere. He's a finalist for the Biletnikoff. Then you guys are like, he was 11 on my board. He was
playing like Archbishop Wood. Take the boys to a high school game around here. From Philly.
So we'll toss that out. We'll go. So between Dane and Ben, I mean, Zach Wilson. Dane, you said yourself as a freshman, he was on people's radars.
Yeah, on the radar as a guy to watch, as a guy to keep an eye on, sure. But
as a quarterback,
top 5 pick, a top 5 pick. No one was talking about him as a. If anybody finds a first round mock from anywhere before September with Zach Wilson on it, please send it in. Please.
There's one out there somewhere.
No way. Maybe Zach Wilson's brother. That's it. That's it.
There's so many mock drafts out there. Someone's probably gonna have it. And then with Ben, it's like, a guy who leads Alabama receiving yards, he'll just go unnoticed in the process. That's not gonna account for anything. Oh, this is tough one. I'm gonna give it to Ben this week. I'll go Devontae Smith. The fact that everyone thinks that Jamar Chase with the lock for number one and a receiver, Devontae Smith has a chance. I feel cheap using Devontae Smith 2 weeks in a row as the Heisman winner and as the meteoric rise guy, but yeah, that'll be my pick. So
that's a pity vote right there. That's what that is.
We do have to decide how many more of these we've got in the canister because it's a tight one. It's now a 1 point race with you guys tied second place and me 1 point ahead. But we'll do that offline, guys. This was fun. C-Mac, thanks once again for joining us. Ben, Dane, we will talk to you guys later.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the draft mailbag.
Well, great stuff there from Ben, from Dane, from C-Mac. Hope you guys enjoyed that debate there in our On the Clock segment. Let's wrap this one up with our draft mailbag. We've got a great one here. Scouts It Out left a 5-star review. Quick little Eagles mock draft. First round, LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase. That's going to be a popular target for Eagles fans and with media in mock drafts for sure. Big fan of Jamar Chase and what he will bring to the NFL. Second round, you're going to go DK Kendrick, who you remember the discussion we had earlier in the show with about Darius Slay. Toolsy corners, a little bit lack of experience. That's kind of what you're looking at here with DK Kendrick. He's got a lot of traits that you're looking for, just limited experience on that side of the ball. But what can he be down the road? You're going to have that discussion a lot with DK Kendrick, a former receiver recruit coming out of high school when he first got to Clemson. Third round, a couple of picks here, two players that I love. First, you've got Najee Harris, the Alabama running back, extremely productive, really physical runner, instinctive runner, can win in a lot of different ways. Love Najee Harris. Really love him in the third round. So like that fit there. Scouts out. Alec Lindstrom, the talented center from Boston College. Only a redshirt sophomore. Has not declared yet. We don't know if he's going to declare. My guess, if he were, he might go a little bit higher than this in the third round. So I love the value there with you getting Lindstrom there in round 3. We're going to round this out. A couple of picks here. Ben Cleveland, the interior offensive lineman from Georgia. Darius Washington, the safety from TCU. And then Josh Jobe from Alabama. I think you're looking at Cleveland as a kind of a plug-and-play, dirty work player on the interior. Probably more of a backup than a starter. But really good mock draft there, Scouts out. Hope you continue to send those in. Really appreciate everybody that continues to throw your mock draft up on our Apple Podcast page. As we get going here, we're going to start doing more and more of these podcasts. So that means more and more room for your guys' comments, your questions, and your mocks. So just go on to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment with your question or your mock draft. We'll hit on it here on the show. That being said, we'll be back a little bit later this week. We've got a fun one brewing for later this week. Ben Fennell, Ross Tucker, and a special guest as always. We'll catch you later this week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.